here to talk about Thelma Finney. It's not just men who break the law. Women get into some trouble as well. So, yeah, she's got the good name. So Thelma Finney, married to John Finney. Their friend Earl Eddy, they decided that they were going to go in and purchase this land on Lake Coeur d'Alene, out toward the southern end of Lake Coeur d'Alene. And they were going to purchase this land that used to be a church camp and just kind of have an area where they all could settle, and that they wanted to open up a bar and a restaurant. And this is all taking place in the 1940s. And so at the time, the law of the land was if you were going to open a bar and a restaurant and you wanted to serve alcohol, then your establishment had to be within a municipality. It couldn't just be on county land, it had to be within city land. And there was no city around, so they decide that they're going to take their plat of land and they're going to turn it into their own little city. At the time, there was only one road that came in and out of the area. Most of the people that came in did so by boat. And so they decide to get about establishing their city, and their friend Earl Eddy was going to be the one that lived on site and was the manager of the restaurant and bar. And so Earl said, well, if I'm going to be doing all of the work, then you're going to name this city after me. And the city became known as Eddyville. Eddyville is now where Arrow Point is located. And so they build this bar and restaurant, and they're all co-owners until Earl Eddy is no longer able to manage the bar, and they start hiring people to take over his duties. Thelma is doing the books, and Thelma is realizing that these bartenders are skimming a little bit off the top, and she's getting a little fed up with this, and decides that she's just going to do it herself and tend bar. The only problem is that it was also illegal for women to tend bar at this time. Thelma had always been a very strong, independent woman. She was also independently wealthy, so to speak. She had money of her own, and she actually loaned money to her husband for him to be able to buy a boat to do tours around the lake. And so Thelma's this really strong woman. She decides she doesn't care if she's breaking the law. She's going to tend bar. And so she and her husband had gone down to Boise to the Idaho State Liquor Association's conference, and she met these other women who were also bartenders that were also knowingly breaking the law. And they decide that they wanted to do something about this, and Thelma was selected to be a test case. And so Thelma is in her bar, and she's doing what she normally does, and she hears rumor that the sheriff and the U.S. Marshal are on their way over, and they're about to arrest her for serving alcohol. And what made matters worse is this was taking place on a Sunday, and it was also illegal at the time to serve alcohol on a Sunday. So she's breaking two laws here. So the sheriff comes in, the U.S. Marshal comes in, they sit down, and they both order whiskey and 7-Up from her. She gets them both drinks, serves them their drinks, and the sheriff says, I'm sorry, Thelma, but I'm gonna have to arrest you. And she knew this was coming. She puts her hands out, they put the cuffs on her, and as they're leading her out to their boat to take her off to the jail in Coeur d'Alene, she yells to all the patrons in the establishment, and she says, look for me in the funny papers. So they get her in the boat, they get her all the way down to the jail, and the sheriff splits from the U.S. Marshal, and he says, this place is such a dump, I can't stand the idea of you staying in this jail overnight, I'm going to take you back home. So he gets her back in the boat, takes her back to the bar. As soon as he leaves, she gets back to serving alcohol, and so wasn't deterred at all. She ended up getting convicted for breaking the two laws, and she takes her case on appeal all the way up to the Supreme Court, and fights on the premise that as an owner, a co-owner of the establishment, she should have the right to do all of the duties that it takes for her establishment to succeed. So it makes it all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decides in her favor, and they change the laws, and now women are allowed to serve bar if they are a co-owner of the establishment. So she was a great pioneer for women's rights in North Idaho in the first part of the 20th century, and she was just an interesting woman all around. Her obituary, I have to read a quote from it because it's just too fun. Would you mind holding my light? Thank you so kindly. I have to catch up. I haven't been using it. And so this was written by her daughter, and she says, Thelma Finney never repeated anything she heard or saw at Eddyville. She knew where every skeleton was buried, who dug the hole, where they got the shovel, and who sold it to them. So, sounds like a pretty good bartender if you've got some secrets you need to share. So that's
also part of Finney Boats.
Finney Boatworks. For those of you who have been here for a little while, you might know about the Siwiwana, which John Finney had. Marlowe Finney, who later became Marlowe Faulkner, long time, has done a lot in this community. They're a very, very prominent family. There's also a claim that the Finney family was the first to invent water skiing. And so there's, I can't remember exactly where it is. There's another city that makes the same claim, and it's in the same year. So it's pretty hard to know who exactly it is that invented water skiing. It's potentially possible that water skiing was invented on Lake Coeur d'Alene by the Finney family, or it was in another area and they just like to say they did anyway. So they're a pretty cool family. And Marlowe, if she was raised by Thelma, then you can, if you knew Marlowe, you could very understand how tough Thelma might be, because Marlowe was pretty tough.
What year did she die?
Thelma passed away in 1994. So, and City of Coeur d'Alene, like I mentioned, they have a website. All of their grave sites are searchable, so you can put in a name and it'll tell you where they're buried. For some reason, Thelma is not on it, but we know she was buried by John Finney, so we had to look him up, find where he is. Obviously, she's right here. They just don't have her on their database for some reason.
Is there a missing for a third one?
No, they just have some trees,
Oh,
some decoration. Yeah. So, and you'll notice some of these headstones are in better shape than others. The museum's going to be organizing kind of a cleanup restoration day, where we get rid of some of the lichen and different materials that are degrading some of these headstones, just to help them last a little bit longer. So if that's anything that you're interested in, definitely follow us on Facebook, subscribe to our emails, because we'll be putting information out to do some trainings and get volunteers for that. Okay, we'll make our way back out to the back.
Posterity.